So this is our last presentation for our chapter on gender, and the topic of this presentation, as you can see from the title, is queer activism. Actually, more than descriptions and analysis, I'm going to present you here with some questions and then some examples, and I'm going to direct you to some relevant literature which has covered extensively and in a very interesting way these topics. But let's start from the questions. Before the questions, it's important to, I think, understand and to note that sexual identities and sexual politics more extensively are very important to understand national movements. We have seen this throughout this whole unit. And they're also very important to look at relations of power. This is, after all, what the gender perspective is all about. So if we have looked at the case of women's activism throughout this unit number 3, I think it's now the time to look at queer activism a little bit more in detail. So this perspective raises a number of questions. The question number 1, is there a connection between the politics of occupation and the politics of homophobia in Israel? Between the oppression of Palestinians by Israel and the oppression of queers within the Palestinian territories. This may seem a twisted question, but in the sense that the oppression of queers within the Palestinian territories is not at the hands of Israel, but the occupation carries a responsibility in this. So we will look a little bit into this. And is there a connection between the treatment, which is generally considered rather progressive, that Israel reserves for sexual minorities, but its very harsh treatment and persecution of Palestinians? So the main question underlying all the other ones is really, is there a link between the oppression of sexual minorities and the oppression of other social minorities? In other words, how normative in political terms is heterosexuality, and how this is reflected in the politics of the occupation, and therefore in the deconstruction of the nationalism which sees heterosexuality as normative. So if there is a link between, I mean, after all, it's all a matter of rights. And if the ethno-nationalist paradigm that holds Israel is generally heterosexual, what is the connection between the violation of this normative pattern and the violation of human rights for sexual minorities? I direct you to this blog, bullybloggers.wordpress.com, at this address, where you can see a discussion of one of the main points behind the relationship between Israel and its gay population and Palestinian queers. That is what is normally referred to as pinkwashing/pinkwashing, but I will return to this in a minute. You have noticed that I have used here interchangeably the word gay, homosexual, and queer, and I'm very much aware of the differences between these in the use of this terminology. However, I direct you for this to the article by Gil Hochberg that you can find in your bibliography and in your linkography. So let's move on to the question of pinkwashing and pinkwatching. Here is the article by Hochberg I just mentioned, and he continues to ask a number of questions. after all, Israel is considered to be one of the most gay-friendly countries, and Tel Aviv one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world. So, how is this connected? What role does this presentation have in a course on peace building and protest movements and civil rights, and the affirmation of civil rights? The question is hidden in a way, and I'm reading it straight away from the article that I'm quoting. How does the Israeli state mobilize the discourse of gay rights to promote its own national interest, as in the case of its inclusion of openly self-identified homosexuals in the army? How does this policy of inclusion help the state not only expand its military forces, but also nationalize and militarize its gay citizens, assuming their patriotism as a form of normalization? So, if you go at this website, www.peakwatchingisrael.com, you will see not only a number of debates of this, but a whole conference that that was recorded, and it's available online. I think that turning an interesting organization that connects the deconstruction of militarism and of normative heterosexuality and building bridges with Palestinians is an organization that came about in 2000, which is called Kvisa Shchora, which is Black Laundry, which translates as Black Laundry, and which was around for about 2 years, which is analyzed in this article in the same issue of GLQ, entitled Performative Politics in Israel, Queer Anti-Occupation Activism. Now, one of the main points of this article is that, and one of the main points for including this presentation in this MOOC, in this course, is that Kvisa Shchora, Black Laundry, turned the perspective of queer activism in Israel. Because until around this time, until Kvisa Shchora was established in 2000, Israeli gay activism centered on coming out of the closet, but getting out of the closet into a full citizenship where the normative model was that of having the same rights as heterosexuals, having the same rights vis-a-vis family life, for example, and thus being normalized into a model of heterosexuality, which in a way help maintain a neutral, if you want, and an apolitical image. All the struggles that were undertaken by the gay community expressed a feeling for longing and assimilation, and in a way of joining in the Republican notion of citizenship that functioned in Israel. The most obvious examples that come to mind are abolishing the discrimination against gays in the IDF, and the right to same-sex parenthood, and particularly motherhood. So these are just two obvious examples that point out that soldierhood and motherhood are central in a conception of citizenship which has nothing different from a heterosexual model. And it's quite obvious that Palestinians cannot be included in this perspective, given that in its neutrality and being apolitical, it actually buys in or remains into the boundaries of the national discourse. Aguda, and here is the website, lgbt.org, is is on the brink between buying into, staying inside this model, in helping many Palestinians emerging or running away actually from the territories, and the model that the organization that came after Aguda. Aguda still exists, by the way, and that is again Black Laundry, the organization that I've just mentioned. This was a small organization, about 20 to 40 active members, and a mailing list of about 200, so more people to be involved, are relatively young to middle-aged, 20 to 40, as in other cases 90% of the members were of Jews of European origins and middle-class background with college education, in a sense not very different apart from the age from Mahsam Watch, Women in Black, and other organizations that we've seen. Now, one of the successes, or one of the strong points of Black Laundry was the creation of a counter space, a counter discourse, and therefore also a counter public. And I'm borrowing this term from the article by Amalia Ziv, that in turn borrows it from Nancy Fraser. And the definition of counter public that we have here is parallel discursive arenas where members of subordinated social groups invent and circulate counter-discourses to formulate oppositional interpretations of their identity, interests, and needs. And if we look at the activism of Black Laundry, we will find exactly this. A group that worked to, that engaged in activism, but that worked to connect or to help understand that there are different forms of oppression, and that one is connected to the other. I will just read out together, we can read it together, from a handout, from a leaflet that Black Laundry distributed at a gay event. And it reads: "The oppression of minorities inside Israel is a product of the same racism, same chauvinism, and the same militarism that sustain the oppression and the occupation of the Palestinian people. There can be no genuine freedom in an occupying society. In a militaristic society, there is no room for the other and the unprivileged: lesbians, gay men, transsexuals, labor migrants, women, Mizrahim, Arabs, Palestinians, the poor, the disabled, and others." So as you can hear, this is a very strong statement that, however, points out to the fact that until Israeli society remains so militarized, and militarism in itself remains as a value, the oppression of whoever does not belong to the normative, to the group which is considered normative, will be oppressed. The style of activism of Black Laundry was really that of creating a counter public space in which to show and manifest their a direct intervention into the public arena. This is the picture of, I don't know if it is really that one, but Kvisa Shchora appeared on the scene on the Gay Pride of 2000, when for the first time, all dressed in black, there was this banner, they brought this banner saying there is no pride in occupation. For the first time, thus establishing this link between different but equal and connected freedoms. So I don't know if this is the picture from the Gay Pride 2000 when this first appeared, but it may have been repeated a few times since. Another important point, another important aspect of the activities of Black Laundry is their performative approach, and also a confrontational approach to dealing with protest. And here I'm just showing you a picture that I'm going to comment in a minute. Again, I'm not sure from which from which demonstration this was taken. You can find these pictures on the web. But the idea here was to personify, to embody the national other. For example, when it once happened that in a demonstration, members of Black Laundry marched together in silence, blindfolded, in a row, as a row of Palestinian prisoners, and the power of this of these practices, if you want, is to break. To embody the other and therefore identify with him, her, in a space and in a time when identification is prohibited in general. And in a way, this puts Gisha Shchora also far away from movements like Maxim Watch, for example, where solidarity and help is expressed rather than counter public discourses are being created. So this is a very interesting movement that I encourage you to explore further. There is no time, unfortunately, in this presentation to look at the issue of Palestinians from the West Bank having to flee because of their gender and sexual identity. And I direct you to a movie for this. I've listed a couple of movies on this topic, but in particular, I would like you to enjoy, if you do, a film by Yariv Moser called The Invisible Man, that tells the story of 3 gay men running away from the West Bank into Tel Aviv, where they are forced to live in hiding, given they have no papers to legally stay, and how they are helped to eventually leave the country and rebuild for themselves a new life abroad. So this is the end of our week on gender, and I'll see you next week with health and education. Thank you very much. Goodbye.